Our story this morning is found in Luke chapter 10, verses 38 to 42, the better choice. Martha knelt before her kneading bowl and punched down the dough just a little too hard. Oh, that Mary! What did she think she was doing? Martha picked up the dough and sprinkled a little more flour on the board before tossing it back down and pummeling it again. She let out a huff and dropped the dough into the stone bowl and stood to her feet. She shifted the bowl to her hip and walked to the doorway where she could peer across the courtyard into the reception room on the other side. Jesus sat teaching with his disciples gathered at his feet, and there was Mary right in the middle of them. It was absolutely outrageous. Martha stormed across the room to place the bowl near the oven to rise. Then she walked to the shelf full of kitchenware, reached up to the top and pulled down a large red jug. It was white at the bottom with a long, graceful neck and a delicate handle. She carefully placed the serving piece on a nearby stone table and began to pour olive oil into it from a large container. Oh, the emerald green oil flowed in smoothly and filled the kitchen with a delicious aroma. What was Mary thinking? Had she even stopped to consider the implications of her actions? By sitting at the rabbi's feet, she was assuming the position of a disciple. It was scandalous. Mary placed the jug of olive oil on the table and started arranging dates and olives on the platter. For a woman, surviving in this world meant learning how to play the game and stay in her place, which was a place of service and not at the feet of a rabbi studying theology. Of course, every little girl held stories of the great women of faith close to her heart. There was the brave Queen Esther, who outwitted a powerful politician to save her people, Ruth, who was faithful and courageous, and Deborah, the prophetess. But the teaching of the rabbis over the past several hundred years had done serious damage to the position of women in Israeli society. Now, a woman's ideal position was at home, out of sight, and quiet. She was considered inferior at best and inherently more sinful than her male counterparts at worst. Sons were preferable, daughters were a disappointment. The neighbors were certainly already talking about Mary's indiscretions. Who could marry her little sister now? Pausing, Martha looked across the courtyard again. Rabbi Jesus didn't seem to hold much respect to the traditions concerning women. He called his women followers, his disciples, and he depended on them to support his ministry. He even allowed them to travel with him. Oh, Martha loved Jesus and believed his message, but all this radical philosophy made her more than a little nervous. And now Mary was wrapped up in it. As the older sister, Martha was responsible for Mary, so she had to do something. Martha walked over to the oven and peered inside to check the lamb she was roasting, and then she turned, wiped her hands on a towel, and straightened her robe. She took one last look around the kitchen and marched across the courtyard. She stood in the doorway of the reception room for a moment and waited for Jesus to notice her. Glancing up at her as he taught, he motioned to an empty spot on the floor. Martha's cheeks burned and turned away. A few moments later, when he reached a stop in his teaching point and discussion, he excused himself and came to his hostess' side. Martha set her jaw, squared her shoulders, and delivered the argument she was sure he couldn't refuse. Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Jesus saw straight through her protesting to the true anxieties in her heart. He saw all the wounds her society had inflicted upon her spirit and all the lies she had believed about herself and her position in life. He simply loved her too much to allow her to remain in such bondage, so he held out to her a higher standard. "Oh, Martha, Martha," he answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one, and Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." Jesus turned to his seat and resumed teaching. He had defended Mary's right to theological studies, so with his disciples she would remain. Martha's mind and heart were thoroughly immobilized by the expectations of her culture. It wasn't easy to reject all that she had been taught from her birth until that day, but Jesus' invitation to her was a call to freedom. The scent of roasted lamb drifted across the courtyard as Mary gazed for a moment at the empty place on the floor at Jesus' feet, an empty place that represented a better choice. It was hers to receive or reject, and Jesus would remain forever faithful in challenging Martha to embrace all God created her to be. My Creator, forgive me for holding back, embracing mediocrity, and abandoning your glory because I'm too focused on the world's expectations of me. If I am worried about pleasing others, how can I really please you? I was created for your glory alone, O Lord. You deserve the best of all I am and of all I have to give, and may I never silence the song of my life, but live fearfully and joyfully always for you. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day.